Okay, good morning, everyone, once again to our meeting room for this week. This week is week number 9, and we're moving on to our seventh, I believe our seventh seminar for the unit PG 420, International and Regional Security. So far we started with seminar 1, where we looked at the definition of security or the concept of security itself. We looked at various definitions given by different scholars in international relations and security studies. After that, we moved on to the second seminar, where we looked at the second and the third seminar, where we looked at, sorry, the third and the fourth seminars. The second was about security as a concept and trying to understand its definition. The third and the fourth, we looked at China as a state-centric security threat as constructed by Western narratives or Western powers. Then we moved on to look at the third theme for our unit. The third theme was on cybersecurity. So we looked at China as a security threat to cybersecurity, and now we are on our fourth theme or fourth case study, fourth topic, which is climate change as an existential security issue, not only in the Pacific region, but internationally as well, globally. The topic of climate change has been very big in different international forums and meetings, conferences, in academia. A lot of things have been written about climate change as a security threat or environmental security. So to take us through our discussion this week or for this period, we have 7 different representatives. From Group 1, we have Miss Stella Marie Ai. Group 2, we have Miss Olivia Alutau. Group 3, we have Miss Sarah Toroy. Group 4, we have Mr. Kalange Gimiseve. Group 5, we have Miss Tess Duri. Group 6, we have Mr. Esitika. And Group 7, we have Miss Tanya Voivoi. So the approach taken for this unit is a student-centered learning approach, where we are using the seminar-led or student-led seminar method of teaching. So we have questions, we have seminars, and through our interaction in the seminars or the given questions, your answer to the given questions, we are trying to learn about the different case studies that are connected to international and regional security through the seminar discussions and our further discussions on the discussion forum, the weekly discussion forums on Moodle. Okay, so with that, I'll stop here and we'll move on to our first presenter for seminar 7. Representing Group 1, we have Miss Ai. So Stella Marie, please go ahead.
Okay. Can you hear me? Good morning, Mr. Yegura and my fellow colleagues. I am Stella Marie Aihi, and I will be presenting on behalf of Group 1. The statement or question assigned to us is, Golding highlights the role of Pacific Island nations as large ocean states in international climate change negotiations. How can this identity be leveraged to strengthen the Pacific's influence in global forums, and what challenges might arise from this approach? Now, we have separated our given statement into 2 questions, but before I elaborate on them, I would like to define the term large ocean states and briefly state a key point from the reading. Hence, firstly, according to International Science Council 2024, the term large ocean states is used to refer to small island developing states to emphasize their extensive maritime zones and the significant role the ocean plays in their economies, cultures, and environments. These nations, despite their small land areas, possess vast exclusive economic zones that can extend up to 200 miles from their coast. This grants them the rights over large oceanic areas, making their maritime domains much larger than the land territories. On average, the ocean under their control is 20 times the island's landmass. Secondly, from the reading, The New Pacific Diplomacy, we have read under the heading Climate Diplomacy, particularly the subheading Marshalling a Pacific Response to Climate Change, page 191, that was written by Nicolette Golding. And we have found out that in 2005, during the Pacific Islands Forum in PNG, the Pacific leaders agreed on developing the Pacific Plan as a framework for strengthening regional cooperation and integration. The Pacific Plan has since undergone a major review and been replaced by the Framework for Pacific Regionalism. The framework is intended to support focused political conversations and settlements that address key strategic issues, including shared sovereignty, pooling of resources, and delegation of decision-making. Rather than providing a list of regional priorities, it seeks to set out a robust process through which regional priorities will be identified and implemented. This framework ensures regional priorities are identified and implemented under various action plans, which include strengthening access to and management of climate change as a key priority at the national level. However, Golding points out that one key challenge is that not all countries place climate change as a key priority at the national level. Lower-lying Pacific nations are facing serious rising sea level issues, whilst for others it might be a different story, depending on their respective national priorities, thus hindering the regional climate change response. With that in mind, let's shift our focus back to the two questions. The first question reads, how can this identity be leveraged to strengthen the Pacific's influence in global forums? The identity of Pacific Island nations as a large ocean state can be leveraged to strengthen the Pacific's influence in global forums by making international negotiations on climate change for the betterment of the Pacific region. And this can be done within the framework of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. The two key agreements right presently are the Kyoto Protocol and the Paris Agreement. With the Paris Agreement, the first ever universal legally binding global climate deal, according to European Commission 2023, provides a vital avenue for the Pacific Island states to leverage this agreement and use it to their advantage in negotiation, deals and agreements with other big economy states. On to the second point, blue economy leadership. Positioning themselves as leaders in ocean conservation, sustainable fisheries, and marine resources, governance allows Pacific states to shape global discourse on the blue economy and push for frameworks that protect their interests. On to the third point, climate change advocacy. Climate change has affected many in the Pacific region and continues to be a challenge for the islanders. Events like rising sea levels and extreme weather are threats to human and environment security. Pacific Island states positioning themselves as stewards of world oceans may strengthen advocacy for stronger international climate action. For the second question, it reads, what challenges might arise from this approach? First point, infrastructural availability. Plans and projects that will be proposed for the conduction of approaches such as climate advocacy will need proper infrastructure. However, many initiatives are funded by foreign non-government organizations. Hence, without proper infrastructure to host and provide training that will facilitate for the advocacy, this will remain a challenge for the Pacific Island nations. Second point, internal diversity. Pacific Island nations are not homogeneous. Different countries have varied interests, capacities, and geopolitical alignments, which may have complicated unified messaging. Thirdly is financial resources. Limited financial resources, small diplomatic presence, and dependence on aid can reduce the Pacific countries' ability to influence powerful states or corporations. Since most Pacific Island nations are developing with small economies, there are possibilities of being overlooked with a lack of proper consideration from major power nations, such as the US. A clear example would be the US withdrawal from the Paris Agreement this year, and the PNG Prime Minister James Marape writes to the US to reconsider the Climate Pact withdrawal. To conclude, the Pacific Island countries assert themselves as large ocean state, and the narrative behind the identity is that it emphasizes Pacific regionalism, which the Pacific Ocean connects the Pacific Islands and their people to form the foundation of the common identity as large ocean states, and promote cooperation amongst themselves to address common challenges such as climate change. Pacific countries can strengthen their influence in global climate forums by coordinating regional strategies and sharing resources. Through such amplified efforts, they can work together to focus on climate change adaptation measures and how to address related losses or damages in the region. They can leverage on partnerships and innovative financing to build resilience or mitigate climate challenges. We, the Group 1, believe the Pacific consensus on climate change can be heard and addressed through a stronger and unified voice. With that, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ai, and thank you, Group 1, for your answer. Some interesting points raised by Group 1 and Ms. Ai, so I hope all of you took note. One particular point that I just want to expand on is the differences. Our experiences are not the same. Fiji is different from Solomon Islands, and PNG is different because of landmass, population size, geographical terrain, and topography, and etc. So that presents a different challenge for each and every country to really prepare ourselves well before we go into those climate discussions in the various forums. Like for me, myself, one observation that I have made over the years is when we go into those different negotiations or climate diplomatic forums, we have to really understand our objectives and aims and what we want to get out of these different discussions. So that's something that we need to do and systematically study those different climate diplomatic forums. So we understand all these forums, their purpose, objectives, and then what we want to get. What is PNG's national interest? What type of interest do we want to advance in those discussions? So that's something for you future policymakers and leaders to think about. Let's move on to Group 2. Ms. Olivia Anuta will represent Group 2.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning once again, Mr. Aguirre and everyone. So the discussion statement given to us reads, according to Golding, initiatives like the Pacific Oceanscape and marine protected areas showcase regional leadership in climate action. And the questions are, how do these initiatives demonstrate the link between environmental protection and climate democracy? And what lessons can other regions learn from them? Before I begin with my presentation, allow me to define few key terms. First of all, what is Pacific Oceanscape? It is the planet's last great marine wilderness, harboring more than half of the global tuna catch and more than 10,000 species found nowhere else on Earth. And so moving on, what are marine protected areas? Marine protected areas are areas of seas, oceans, river channels, or large lakes that are protected. These marine areas can come in many forms, ranging from wildlife refuges to research facilities. Now, to answer the first part of the question, it reads, how do these initiatives demonstrate the link between environmental protection and climate diplomacy? The Pacific Oceanscape Initiative and marine protected areas demonstrate the link between environmental protection and climate democracy by promoting regional cooperation for ocean conservation, which directly addresses climate change impacts and strengthens the resilience of Pacific Island nations. Now, some of the points we have derived from the Pacific Oceanscape to target critical issues are: point number one, regional effort to fix baselines and maritime boundaries to ensure the impact of climate change and sea level rise does not result in reduced jurisdiction of PICTs. Once the maritime boundaries are legally established, the implications of climate change, sea level rise, and environmental change on the highly vulnerable baselines that delimit the maritime zones of Pacific Islands and territories should be addressed. This could be a united regional effort that establishes baselines and maritime zones so that areas could not be challenged and reduced due to climate change and sea level rise. Second point, regional intergovernmental bodies explore and build on approaches to conserve and manage high seas resources and deep sea ecosystems for the common good. The high seas areas are under severe threat with evidence of overfishing of fish stocks, the destruction of deep sea ecosystems associated with seamounts, and increasing levels of illegal fishing. As agents of the Pacific Islands Ocean region, our interests transcend the limits of EEZ, which is the exclusive economic zone. Representative networks of marine protected areas require prior environmental assessments to prevent harmful impacts from new and emerging activities. On to the third point, influence international and regional ocean priorities, decisions and process to reclaiming the Pacific Way and establishing a high-level representation on oceans. Establish strong and well-supported networks of leaders drawn from local communities, districts, and provinces through to national and regional special issues advocates, ocean champions, and ambassadors to bring the ocean and related issues to center stage at local through the global levels. Pacific Island countries and territories have shown important progress in specific aspects of ocean and coastal management. Political leaders of this country should be supported in championing national and regional priorities in a regionally connected way. Now, on to the second part of the question. It reads, what lessons can other regions learn from them? There are 5 lessons that other regions can learn. Number 1, implementing tangible on-ground adaptation measures, enhance resilience to the adverse effects of climate change through the implementation of best practice adaptation and risk reduction measures. Secondly, governance and decision-making, strengthened national and regional climate change governance mechanisms, like policies and institutional frameworks. Number three, improving understanding of climate change, strengthen technical and institutional capacity to collect, store, and analyze data used to detect climate change signals in the Pacific. Number four, mitigation of global greenhouse gas emissions, enhance access to safe, secure, clean, efficient, and affordable energy supplies. Now on to the final point, partnerships and cooperation. Existing and emerging international partnerships for the Pacific Islands region on climate change and related issues strengthened, effectively coordinated, and harmonized to maximize benefits to PICTS. Thank you, and that brings me to the end of my presentation.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Alutau, representing group number 2. Once again, very interesting points mentioned by Anne. I hope all of you took note of that. So just to expand on the point on our maritime zone, we now have the 2015 Maritime Zones Act. If you've read my chapter on maritime security, you've seen that this act and the National Oceans Policy, they've paved the way for the submission of our, I just sent you the link about the submission of our geographical coordinates under the UNCLOS, UN CLOS, UN Convention on the Law of the Seas. So now we are pushing that our boundaries are clearly defined and we know our maritime boundaries in particular, so that we can manage that space. And if there's any issues in regards to reclaiming of land or the sinking of islands and all that, we can use our laws to address these issues. So make sure you continue to read about what's happening in the country, our Maritime Zones Act, the National Oceans Policy, and other developments that are happening in the maritime space. We'll move on to our third presenter representing Group 3, Miss Sarah Toroy. Please, Miss Toroy, go ahead.
Good morning, everyone. I am Sarah Toroy, and I will be representing Group 3 for this week's seminar. Our group's discussion question for this week reads, Qatar discusses the Boe Declaration's recognition of climate change as a significant security threat. How has this declaration reshaped the Pacific's diplomatic narrative on climate change, and what are its implications for regional and international security policies? Before I answer the given questions, I would like to briefly present an overview of the Boe Declaration and highlight its main objectives. In 2018, the Pacific Islands Forum adopted the Boe Declaration on Regional Security, updated from former frameworks. The declaration recognizes climate change as the greatest threat to the security, livelihood, and well-being of Pacific Islanders, Interpreter 2023. Climate change and environmental challenges play a significant role as a threat multiplier, in a sense that it makes existing challenges worse, such as natural disasters, resource scarcity, and health risks. The Boe Declaration focuses on climate change as a security threat and calls for Pacific Island countries to work together to tackle the issue while working with legal proceedings to resolve debates peacefully in the region. Before the Boe Declaration, climate change was seen mainly as an environmental issue, and security was mainly based on traditional threats like conflicts and natural disasters. However, the declaration has centered climate change as a threat to security. Now I will proceed on to answer the question, which was divided into two parts. The first question reads, how has the Boe Declaration reshaped the Pacific's diplomatic narrative on climate change? I will answer the question with 3 points. Firstly, broadened security framework. The Boe Declaration declares that climate change widens the traditional security concept, which now includes climate, environmental changes, and their impacts on livelihoods and stability. It is now viewed that climate change aggravates existing vulnerabilities and can lead to conflict and displacement. From this, the countries now focus on environmental security and constructing resilience to disaster and climate change. The University of Adelaide 2024. Secondly, the declaration calls for regional alliance, collective approach to fighting climate change. The, the declaration has connected the members of the Pacific Island countries to work together to battle the effects of climate change that is posing threats to the island countries. The countries in the region under the declaration are encouraged to work together to address climate change related threats by sharing resources, knowledge, and strategies to build resilience against climate impacts. Some of the organizations that focus on addressing climate change in the region are the Pacific Islands Climate Actions Network, Pacific Community, and Pacific Islands Forum, among others. And thirdly, policy alignment. The declaration has led to the creation of a framework, the Boe Declaration Action Plan, which lays out the approach that should be taken in terms of dealing with disaster reduction, environmental conservation, and sustainable development. The plan acts as a benchmark for national policies to be aligned with the goals of regional security. This has brought about the change of countries merging climate securities into policies. The third point leads us to the discussion on the second question, which reads, what are its implications for regional and international security? The Boe Declaration has varying implications for regional and international security policies. In terms of regional security policies, the declaration has prompted countries in the Pacific to develop and strengthen their national security strategies and align them to regional security objectives, which makes it effortless for them to work in unity. For example, the PNG National Security Policy highlights climate security and disaster resilience. For, for international security policy, global climate security recognition is one of the implications. The collaborative effort by the Pacific Island countries in voicing the threats of climate change as a security issue on the global stage has garnered recognition. The
Sorry, we're having technical issues due to power outage. I think Sarah has gone out of the meeting room. All right, so due to technical issues, we'll now move on to the representative for group number 4, Mr. Kimiseve.
Yes, good morning, Mr. Yagura and fellow colleagues. Our question on statement reads, Qatar explores the role of regional unity in advocating for ambitious climate action. The question reads, to what extent has the Pacific collective voice been successful in influencing global climate policy, particularly in relation to the Paris Agreement? So I would like to begin by giving a brief summary of our reading before answering the question. So just a summary, in the chapter 7 of our reading titled "The New Pacific Diplomacy," establishing a Pacific voice in the climate change negotiation by George Carter highlights the challenges faced by Pacific Island states in global climate change negotiations. Leaders from Tuvalu, Marshall Islands, and Kiribati expressed frustrations with traditional diplomacy and emphasized the need for a unified Pacific voice and innovative diplomatic strategies. This sentiment was particularly relevant as they prepared for the 2015 Conference of the Parties, or COP, in Paris, which aimed to produce a new global climate change action agreement for the post-2020 period. For nearly 25 years, the global climate change regime has involved complex and multi-phase diplomacy, with negotiations encompassing a wide range of issues and actors including states, civil societies, and private businesses. The regime is based on the 1992 United Nations Framework Conservation and Climate Change, or UNFCCC, and the Kyoto Protocol. Good. Can you guys still hear me? The network is playing up, but can you guys still hear me?
Yes. We're back, sorry.
All right. Okay. Okay. All right. Despite negotiations, impasses, constant contact among negotiators has led to innovative forms of climate diplomacy, with political groupings or interstate coalitions playing a crucial role. So the Pacific leaders have increasingly emphasized the importance of coalitions to strengthen their voice in the climate change regime. These coalitions serve as a complementary bargaining tools to a state's climate policy position. The chapter explores the work of Pacific Island states in establishing a Pacific voice at a global climate change negotiation, highlighting the trends and behaviors of Pacific state participation through coalition. It also notes the lack of attention given to the Pacific Islands experience in academic literature. The chapter concludes by addressing the importance of coalition blocks in climate change regime and the benefits of joining multiple coalitions for Pacific Island states. These coalitions enhance the influence of Pacific states in global negotiations, provide strategic advantages, and strengthening their bargaining power. And the chapter underscores the innovation Sorry, can you guys hear me? Sorry, the network is really playing up here.
Yes, please
Um,
go ahead.
I'll continue by answering the question again. So I'll start off by reading the question. So to what extent has the Pacific collective voice has been successful in influencing global climate policy, particularly in relation to the Paris Agreement? So the Pacific's collective voice has been notably successful in influencing global climate policy, particularly in relation to the Paris Agreement. Pacific Island states played a crucial role in advocating for the inclusion of the 1.5 degrees Celsius target in Paris Agreement, highlighting the existential threat that climate change poses to their nations. Their unified stance and persistent advocacy helped ensure the agreement aimed to limit global temperature rise to well below 2 degrees Celsius, with efforts to limit it to all the way down to 1.5 degrees Celsius. The Pacific's collective efforts have also been instrumental in securing commitments for climate finance and support for adaptation resilience measures by forming coalitions presenting a united front. Pacific Island states have been able to amplify their voice and draw global attention to their unique vulnerabilities and needs. This has led to increased recognition and support from the international community. However, the success of the Pacific collective voice is not without challenges. While the advocacy has led to significant commitments, the implementation and fulfillment of these commitments remain crucial issues. The Pacific continues to push for stronger action and accountability from major emitters to ensure that the goals of the Paris agreements are met. Overall, the Pacific's collective voice has been a powerful force in shaping global climate policy, demonstrating the importance of unity, innovative diplomacy in addressing global challenges. Their continued efforts are central in driving meaningful climate action and securing a sustainable future for their communities. And thank you, and that brings me to the end of my presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Gimme7 and group number 4. We'll go back to Sarah. Ms. Tora will complete the presentation, and apologies for the inconvenience caused by the electricity supply.
Apologies for the network coverage. Apologies. I will now proceed on to answer the second part of the question. So from the third point, policy alignment, this point leads us to the discussion on the question which reads, what are its implications for regional and international security policies? The Boe Declaration has varying implications for regional and international security. In terms of regional security policies, the declaration has prompted countries in the Pacific to develop and strengthen their national security strategies and align them to regional objectives, which makes it effortless for them to work in unity. For example, the PNG National Security Policy highlights climate security and disaster resilience. For international security policy, global climate security recognition is one of the implications. The collaborative effort by the Pacific Island countries in voicing the threats of climate change as a security issue on the global stage has garnered recognition. So the recognition of the impacts of climate change in the Pacific Island countries has made it possible for global security policies to incorporate climate security and consider climate security more effectively. An example would be the European Union's climate security strategy. To conclude, the Boe Declaration was updated from former frameworks and views climate change as a major threat to security, livelihood, and well-being of people in the Pacific. Before the declaration, climate change was viewed as an environmental issue. However, it has now changed the approach of Pacific Islanders, prompting widened security concept, regional alliance, and creation of legal frameworks to mitigate climate change, with implications on regional security such as alignment of national frameworks and global security recognitions. Thank you. That is the end of my presentation.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Toro and Mr. Gimi7. Apologies for the network issues caused by the supply of electricity. We'll now move on to our next presenter. That will be Tess Jury representing Group 5. But based on Sarah's answer, I believe now you understand where our national security policy and the National Security Agency Secretariat and all this fits into the regional system. So it's because of the Boe Declaration that we are being pressed to create a policy or write a policy or strategy on national security and then create this National Security Agency to be the central coordinating mechanism. That gives you a background. And if you look at our case studies or topics as well, they're derived from the Boe Declaration: climate change, cybersecurity, and transnational crime. Okay, let's listen to Tess Duri, Ms. Duri representing group number 5.
Can you all hear me? Still, can you all hear me?
Not loud enough.
Can you guys hear me now? How is it not loud enough?
Now it's okay. You can go ahead.
All right. Good morning, Mr. Yagira and fellow students. For this Seminar 8 presentation, I will be representing Group 5, and we have been assigned the question, apologies for that. We have been assigned a question, which is from the reading, The New Pacific Diplomacy, Chapter 17 by George Carter. He has contributed well to this chapter and has used a few points in this chapter to elaborate the issues and negotiations last year in Fiji during a workshop under the COP29 Presidency's Scientific Council in preparation for the COP29 last year. Our assigned question reads, Carter highlights the Pacific's leadership in global climate diplomacy. How has the Pacific's advocacy influenced the inclusion of loss and damage in international climate negotiations? And what challenges remain in securing adequate compensation for vulnerable island nations? Climate change has over the recent century become an emergent and imminent threat to the lifestyle and livelihoods of the people of the Pacific Islands. Unlike many non-traditional or non-military security threats, climate change is a threat that is preventive, and we are able to implement measures that prevent the effects from affecting the human population. SICA and D, while exploring plurality, complexity, and opportunity in this climate change dilemma, he states that what we observe is that the inequitable nature of the disaster is directly affecting the poorest and the most disadvantaged. Before we continue to answer our two questions, a particular or specific key term in the reading to be defined is global climate diplomacy. It refers to the use of diplomatic channels and strategies to address global climate change and its impact on international relations. It involves negotiating and implementing climate-related policies, treaties, and agreements at the international level, as well as cooperation between countries and other stakeholders to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, adapt to the impacts of climate change, and promote sustainable development, as stated by Diplo and D. On to the first question, how has the Pacific's advocacy influenced the inclusion of loss and damage in international climate negotiations? There are a number of ways that the Pacific's advocacy influenced the inclusion of loss and damage. We have listed a few, and the first is, since 2019, the Pacific Island Developing States Group has assumed a significant diplomatic role for the Pacific Island nations. It has emerged as the leading platform for these states to coordinate and represent their interests globally, particularly in addressing climate change mitigation efforts. The second is Pacific Island nations have proactively built new partnerships and participate in initiatives such as the Climate Vulnerable Forum, which focuses on the issues faced by countries at greatest risk from the impacts of climate change. Thirdly, experience vulnerability and impacts to livelihood. Many Pacific Islands have on a day-to-day routine of experiencing the effects of flooding, hurricanes, storms, and droughts. Therefore, when they are represented at coalition meetings and conferences, they represent a weight to the written evidence of the impacts to the human population. For example, Tonga was still recovering from Cyclone Ian in 2014 when Cyclone Gita hit in early 2018, and this was followed by Cyclone Harold in March 2020. At the same time, it coincided with the start of COVID-19 pandemic, which affected international border closures and social distancing measures, as stated by Handma et al. 2024. Fourthly, the Alliance of Small Island States, which comprises of Pacific Island nations, and these have played a vital role in influencing the global framework, particularly by championing critical matters such as loss and damage. These initiatives highlight the Pacific's increasing prominence and unwavering dedication to tackling climate change challenges, with particular emphasis on the vital issue of loss and damage. We move on to the question 2, and that is, what challenges remain in securing adequate compensation for vulnerable island nations? The challenges that remains in securing this adequate compensation for vulnerable islands are the first being small island nations face constraints in conducting extensive solo diplomatic efforts. An example of this would be the financial constraints as in waste the money. Even though the loss and damage fund exists, figuring out who pays into it and how the money gets distributed is still a big issue. Secondly, countries with the greatest ability to combat climate change often show insufficient concern for its effects. Thirdly, navigating the intricate dynamics of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change negotiations, compounded by the diverse priorities of participating nations, poses significant challenges in securing definitive agreements on financial aid. These are a few challenges of the securing adequate compensation for vulnerable island nations. On to our conclusion, climate change encompasses a complex web of interconnected issues, each characterized by its own distinct traits, governance obstacles, and political dynamics. It also involves diverse interests represented by state and non-state actors. Terhune and Victor 2011. Through groups like PSIDs and AOCs, as well as Pacific Island nations, they have played a key role in highlighting loss and damage in global climate talks. Despite their efforts, they face challenges such as limited diplomatic capacity, weak global concern, governance issues, and difficulties in forming alliances or navigating processes. Addressing these barriers is vital to securing the support they need to combat climate change impacts. Thank you, and this brings us to the end of our presentation.
Okay, thank you, Group 5, and thank you, Ms. Duri, for sharing with us your answer. So a lot of interesting points. So make sure you review what she has presented, and if you have any questions or comments, use our Mural forum for further discussion. Just one point: if you read the last 3 presentations, were on George Carter's work, his chapter in the book, A New Pacific Diplomacy. But if you read his actual PhD thesis, you'll see that he took a really interesting approach in collecting data about climate change and the various international forums or climate change global forums. He used the Talanoa method, the method of storytelling. And what he did was he met after the meetings, during coffee breaks, and on the way to the meetings at hotel lobbies and airports. He sat with those attending the different COP meetings and different climate change meetings, and he asked them questions, and he collected data that way, and then he put together data, and then he published this PhD thesis. So he used the Talanoa method, and a very interesting approach. So that's something you researchers and journalists can also use. There's not much information published about our meetings. What do our climate change representatives, what do they do when they attend meetings in Paris and Bonn and Vienna and all those really fancy cities around the world? What are the outcomes? What are the objectives? What are the type of discussions that they have? These are not covered well in our newspapers as well as academic publications. So that's a challenge to all of us as researchers, policymakers, and journalists. We'll move on to our last 2 presenters. We'll give this time to Yasi Tika representing Group 6, and then we'll conclude with Ms. Voivoi representing Group 7. Mr. Tika, please go ahead.
Thank you. Can you guys hear me? Can you hear me? Okay, thank you, Mr. Giran. PG 420 class. So I'll be representing Group 3, Group 6, and for this seminar presentation, we were assigned a question on one more emphasize the importance of adapting a complex adaptive system approach to address security challenges. So the question is, how can this framework be applied to improve PNG's national and regional strategies for maintaining, mitigating the impacts of climate change? So before we go straight into answering the questions, let's understand some key terms. And the first one is climate change. So as we all know what climate change is, according to REDI 2016, climate change refers to the observed and participated changes in climate, including higher temperature, changes in rainfalls, changes in frequency, and the distribution of weather events such as drought, storms, and flood. So to add on to that, the Boe Declaration declares that climate change remains the single greatest threat to the livelihood, security, and well-being of the people of Pacific. So this phenomenon is mainly experienced in island provinces of Papua New Guinea and the island nations in the Pacific. So for the second key term is complex science theory. So as stated by World Mommy 2023, and I quote, it states that the CST is rooted in physical science, in particular energy, matter, and physical universe. The understanding of matter based on Newtonian theory of linear causality does not always hold true. As scientifically proven, matter sometimes unpredictably can change and generate new patterns without some kind of intervention from the external environment. So this non-linear behavior has implications for understanding the system within which certain things occur or behave. April 20, April 2009, as cited by World in the complex system theory comes from the science, especially the study of things like matter and universe. And in the past, people believed that everything worked in the straight, predictable way. Like if you done one thing, it causes another thing. Sorry, guys. So, but scientists have found out that this isn't always true. Sometimes matter behave in unexpected way, changes on its own, or form new patterns without anything from the outside causing it. So this is called nonlinear behavior. So this proposes the complex adaptive system approach. And complex adaptive system approach comes from the idea of physical science, where things like energy and matter don't always behave in a simple or predictable way. In the past, scientists believe that one action always caused by one result, like the Newton's theory, but now we know that's not always true. Sometimes systems change on their own in surprising ways without anything from outside causing it. So this kind of unpredictable, non-linear helps us understand why complex systems like society, environment, and government can be hard to control or predict because they are always changing and small actions can lead to big or unexpected result. So in simple terms, the complex adaptive system approach means that the whole system like national security is shaped by how different parts like people, environment, organization work together and change. So since this part influence each other, the outcome can be unpredictable and solving one issue might lead to another. So for a simple definition, the complex adaptive system is a system made up of many connected parts that interact and change and adapt over time in unpredictable ways. So moving on to our main discussion, which is how can this how can the complex adaptive system framework be applied to improve PNG's national and regional strategies for mitigating the impacts of climate change. Sorry. So to answer that, we have broken down into two sections. First one is how can this framework be applied to improve the PNG's national strategies for mitigating. Sorry, I'm outdoors, so a lot of disturbance. So for the national strategies, we have highlighted 4 points here. First one is recognizing the interconnectedness. So a complex adaptive system approach understands that many factors influence each other. For example, climate change affects food security, health, and migration patterns. By seeing how these issues are connected, PNG can plan a more effective strategy that address multiple challenges at once. So, like the complex adaptive system approach means that understand that problems are connected and affected each other. Uh, for example, like climate change, we make it harder for food to grow, causing health problems and forcing people to move to new places. By looking at how these problems are connected, PNG can make better plans that solve several problems at the same time. So the second point is flexibility and adaptation. Like in the complex system approach, the ability to adapt is crucial. So PNG can create policies that allows community to adjust to changing conditions, like building houses that can withstand floods, flooding or or finding research on drought resistant crops. This way, when climate impact happens, community can respond quickly instead of being affected. So the so things change, especially with the weather. So it is important for Papua New Guinea to be ready to deal with these changes. This means that making plans and rules that helps people adjust. For example, helping people build homes that don't get washed away easily when flooding, or teaching farmers to grow crops that can survive when there is not enough rain, something like that. So for that point is feedback mechanism. So establishing a system to receive feedback on how well strategies are working is important. Feedback mechanism are ways to check if a plan or strategy is working well. So they help us learn from the result and make changes if needed. For example, if we try something new and it doesn't work, feedback helps us to fix it quickly instead of waiting too long. Like for example, in PNG's context, if the government introduces a farming method to help farmers grow food, they can visit the communities and ask the farmers how it's going. If the farmers say the new method isn't working because of too much rain or lack of tools, then the government can change the plan or provide more support. So for the fourth point on national strategies, which collaboration across sectors. So climate change impact involves various sectors like health, agriculture, and infrastructure. So a complex adaptive system approach promote working together across these different areas, allowing for comprehensive solutions. For instance, improving public health can support agricultural adaptations or vice versa. So, and sorry, moving on to the second part, which is how can this framework be applied to improve PNG's regional strategies for mitigating the impacts of climate change. So we have identified three. The first one is regional collaboration. So a complex adaptive system approach fosters regional collaboration across border, recognizing that climate change does not occurs within a set within the border of a particular country. It affects everyone. So PNG can work with neighboring countries to develop joint strategies that address transboundary issues such as climate change threats, disaster response, and those that. So collaborative framework can facilitate resource sharing and coordinate response to environmental changes. So the second question, our second point for regional strategies is holistic policy development. So recognizing that climate change impact various sectors, a complex adaptive system framework encourages the integration of climate consideration into all aspects of policy, including agriculture, health, transportation, and planning. For instance, regional policies on land management can incorporate strategies to improve agriculture resilience while also addressing issues of land and food security, taking into account interconnected challenges faced by those different sectors. So the third point is adaptive management practices. So the complex adaptive system approach advocate for adaptive management, which involve continuously monitoring and adjusting strategies based on observed outcomes and changing conditions. For PNG, this could mean that implementing pilot projects in different areas or different countries within the region to test climate adaptation strategies such as new crop cropping planting techniques or disaster preparedness plans and adopting successful practices on a larger scale while discarding those that are ineffective. So on to our summary, applying a complex adaptive system approach in PNG is emphasized by Walupomi involve understanding the interconnected nature of climate issues, being flexible in response, continuously learning from changes, and promoting collaboration across various sectors and neighboring countries in the region. So this holistic strategy can lead to a more effective and sustainable outcome in mitigating the impact of climate change. Yeah, that's all for group 6, and thank you guys for listening.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Tika, and thank you, Group 6, for a very comprehensive answer. You also taking the time to explain the complex adaptive systems approach. So from your own perspective, so I hope that will help your colleagues to further understand what the system is and how we're using it to address our national security issues. We now move on to our final presenter, Ms. Tanya Voivoy, representing Group 7, who conclude the seminar for today.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Yegura. Hi, everyone. I am Taina Voivoy. I will be presenting on behalf of group number 7, and I will be the final presenter for this seminar discussion. Now, without any delay, I'll jump straight into the question that was allocated to us. So our question reads, Hualup Momi identifies climate change as a critical non-traditional security issue for Pacific Island states. How can PNG and other Pacific nations integrate climate resilience into their broader security frameworks to address the cascading effects of the climate-related risks? Before I go into answering that question, I'd like to define what non-traditional security is and explain why climate change is considered a critical non-traditional security issue. So according to NTS Asia, non-traditional security refers to challenges that arise from non-military sources and threaten the survival and well-being of states and societies. These challenges include issues like climate change, resource scarcity, pandemics, transnational crime, and irregular migration. So unlike traditional security, which focuses on military threats and state sovereignty, NTS emphasizes human security, societal stability, and the need for transnational cooperation. So in the PDF titled Hualup Momi System Perspective, Francis Hualup Momi used the complexity science theory to identify climate change as a security issue, which he called the chaos system. Now, climate change is considered a critical non-traditional security issue for several reasons. Number one, widespread impact. Number two, increased natural disasters and resource scarcity. So moving on to our discussions on the answers of the question. So we broke the question down into two focus areas. Now, the first one, we're providing examples of how climate change is already affecting security in PNG and other Pacific nations. And we also identified the cascading effects. Now, cascading effects refers to how one impact can trigger others relating to the climate risks. So climate change is increasingly impacting security in PNG and other Pacific nations. And two of the most common factors of climate change in the Pacific are, number one, rising sea levels, and number two, extreme weather events. So moving on to what its cascading effects are. Number one is economic instability. So under economic instability, we have 2 points. The first point is damage to key industries. So climate-induced disasters like rising sea levels, floods, or cyclones disrupt industries such as agriculture, fisheries, and tourism. In PNG, for instance, subsistence farming and fishing is what sustains many families, and these families are directly affected by saltwater intrusion and changing weather patterns, leaving the economy of PNG struggling to support local people.
The second point under economic instability is reduced government revenue. So when there's a decline in the economic output, it reduces tax revenue, which then weakens the ability of the government to fund essential services like healthcare, education, and disaster response. For instance, the flooding in Solomon Islands in 2014, the heavy rains caused flash floods in Honiara, killing over 20 people and displacing thousands. The floods damaged infrastructure and homes, leading to long-term economic challenges. Okay, the second point of the second cascading effects is social displacement. We provided two examples. The first one is between 2008 and 2018, more than 616,000 new displacements were recorded in 17 Pacific countries. And there were 97 disaster events triggering displacements. Now, this situation left thousands of people fleeing to devastating effects of climate change impacts, giving up their livelihoods, dreams, and prospects. In a report by Post Korea in 2024, last year, authorities in PNG's Madang province have confirmed 28 have died following serious flooding in the Middle Ramu district. And our second example would be the Highlands drought, which occurred in the years 1997, 2015 to 2016, and 2023 to 2024. So this drought has severely impacted subsistence farming, which is the backbone of livelihoods up in the highlands. Families affected by the drought often migrate to urban areas or other regions in search of food and water. This influx strains resources in host communities and can lead to social tensions. Okay, on to the second focus area. We have outlined current security frameworks in PNG and other Pacific nations. And we've also identified two strategies to integrate climate resilience into national and regional security frameworks. So below are two key frameworks. Number one, National Climate Change and Disaster Risk Reduction Policy 2017 to 2030. So this is one of the primary. Sorry, am I still audible? Okay, sorry for that. So number one of the key frameworks is National Climate Change and Disaster Risk Reduction Policy 2017 to 2030. So this is one of the primary national initiatives that combines climate change adaptation and disaster risk reduction. The policy prioritizes resilience and vulnerability reduction with a particular emphasis on incorporating climate change adaptation into development planning and governance. And at the regional level, there is the Pacific Island Forum, or PIF. Now, the PIF is a key actor that facilitates climate change and actions in the Pacific. This is done through two key elements of the PIF dealing with climate change, which are the Boe Declaration 2018 and the Pacific Islands Framework for Action on Climate Change. Collaboration at the regional level is vital to ensure climate change resilience is enhanced to address new and emerging threats that come with climate change. One way to ensure effective management of climate change and risk reduction at the national and regional level My apologies for the interruption. Continuing on from the key strategies to integrating climate resilience. So number one, as I've mentioned, is including climate change in national and regional security policies. Climate change can make security problems worse, like forced migration, community instability, and fights over resources like land, food, and water. If national and regional security policies include climate change, security forces like the military and police can better identify and prepare for related threats. And the second point is improving early warning systems and mitigations of disaster risks reduction mechanisms. By improving early warning systems and disaster risk reduction mechanisms through providing real-time data on climate-related risks such as droughts, floods, storms, rising sea levels, at the national and regional level, climate-related risks are managed before they escalate into security issues. These technologies can be shared across national borders, allowing countries to respond promptly to the disasters with potential security implications such as cross-border displacement or resource rivalry. Now, in conclusion, climate change is more than just an environmental issue. It's a growing security threat for PNG and other Pacific nations. By including climate risk in security planning and improving early warning systems, these countries can better protect their people, resources, and future. Thank you, and that is all from me and my group.
Thank you, Ms. Voivoy and Group 7. So that brings us to the end of our seminar for today, Seminar 7. We'll move on to our next seminar next week, Seminar 8, and we'll continue the discussion on climate change. To wrap up, I would like to thank all the representatives representing the 7 different groups for your time and for sharing with us detailed answers in relation to the assigned questions. And I hope those who attended have taken note of what they've shared with us. And if you have comments, questions, we can interact further in the discussion forum for this week on Moodle. So that brings us to the end of our seminar 8, and thank you everyone for your attendance. And once again, apologies for the inconvenience caused by the network outage as a result of the fluctuation in current, or I don't know, power, electricity going on and off. So it's we have a challenging morning this morning, but thankfully we were able to listen to all the presenters, and now we have come to the end of our presentation. So thank you all once again, and we all have a great day today. We'll meet again this Friday.